Hello, everyone. It's the first day after the US elections, and I appreciate you taking time to join us. In the RevOps, we all are busy with our Q4 pipeline, fiscal year closing, as well as strategy planning and preparing for 2023 go to market. And of course, a lot of us are also preparing for a worst case scenario. There's obviously doomsday that's getting painted for the end of the year as well as 2023. Situation is not improving, and it's about time for RevOps to like further take seat at the strategy table, as Roslyn mentioned it time and again. So it's very important for the RevOps team to look at how to go about planning for this. And I think data becomes core to this whole planning and strategy. So today we are going to get into the gritty details of business processes and customer data, which is typically managed by a RevOps team across the go-to-market function. So here I am, Abhijit Vijayargi, the CEO and co-founder of Nektar.ai. This is our first webinar, first of many. So I welcome you all who are joining us today. So the topic today is plugging your CRM data leaks to supercharge your growth for 2023. So let me take you through a little bit of agenda that we're gonna cover today. Largely focusing on the CRM data problem. Is it still overlooked for 2023? What RevOps can do to solve that? Um, we can't have a discussion on data without discussing tech stack. So we'll definitely deep dive on that. Uh, we'll talk about Lily AI. We have John here. They're one of the organizations who have solved it in the best possible manner. The whole problem around incomplete and inconsistent CRM data. So, I'd love to hear his perspectives today. And then how a data pack CRM can be a competitive edge for GTM teams in 2023. And then how RevOps or sales ops in this specific case boost revenue agility and growth for 2023. So, that's going to be the topic of discussion. Before we move on to the topics, let's look at uh, our panelists today. So I'll let them go for their respective introductions. Roslyn, over to you first.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. So I'm Rosalind Santa Elena. I'm currently just founded my own business called the RevOps Collective, but have been sort of on a mission to, as Abhijit mentioned, to really champion revenue operations, as a function, but also the people. So I've been in the go-to-market ops space for the last 2 decades, big companies, small companies, kind of all in between, but always on kind of on the operations side. So super excited just to be here and chat about super important topic, data and your CRM. So thanks for having me.
How about you, John? Why don't
I
you go
guess I'll
next?
go next. Hi, it's a
Yeah.
pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. Abhijit, thank you very much for asking me to join today. I'm John Aguilar. I'm the senior director of sales operations here at Lily AI. We are a solution for e-commerce retailers. I've been in the sales ops world for almost 20 years now. Prior to that, I had a career in sales as well. Was a bag quota carrying sales rep back, and I'm very, very happy to be here. My charter these days is primarily focused around all things revenue as well as sales ops, and in addition to that, sales enablement. And I've been with Lily AI now for just about a year.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Roslyn, for the introduction. So, just for everyone out there, welcome again to our very first webinar. We're quite excited to have you here. We're going to talk about all things data, growth, and to that fact, sustainable growth as we go into 2023. So, we've reserved the last 10 minutes for audience Q&A. So, please feel free to use the questions tab on your bottom right, or else like use the chat button as well, and our moderator will be looking for questions as we dive into the topics. So before we get into the topics, it'll be good to like get some poll going. So we'll be conducting bunch of poll today, just to understand the pulse and perspective as we get into the topics. So the first question is around the data that's missing in CRM. So feel free to like vote for these polls. We're going to cover them as we go about the topic. And with that now, let's look at some of the insights that we noticed as we started looking at the data challenge. So one such problem is about the opportunity data, right? The pipeline data that's core to any business. It's core to the revenue growth. So as per Oracle's 2020 study, 79% of this opportunity-related data never makes its way into CRM. And we all know that the data that stays in the CRM decays every week. So it's a big problem out there as organizations deal with their pipeline health, and business insights associated with it. The second insight that we saw was in Forrester, where they pointed out about unified view. 68% of the revenue leaders they spoke with believe that they don't have a single view of their customers. Again, a big problem, especially when you look at the scattered teams, the distributed tech stacks. It gets quite difficult to tie the whole buying journey together. And the last problem we looked at was about the data decay. That's pretty pertinent to the CRM systems. And whether you use Salesforce or HubSpot or Dynamics or any of the CRM out there, the problem is pretty common. 70% of the CRM data decays, gets duplicated, or it's inaccurate. So a big chunk of time for RevOps teams goes into managing that. This basically came out in Modern Sales Pros, one of the communities that we love, 2021 insight. So with that, what we'll do is we'll move on to the next phase, which is basically going into our Q&A with the panelists. So I'll have my first question for Rosaline here. Um, so the question that I have for you, Rosaline, is about like we're looking at 2023. Why is poor CRM data still a problem for companies?
No, that's a loaded question. That could be the whole topic for the day. But I think about when people hear the word CRM, it's almost like a bad word, right? It's got a really bad rap. I think it's one of those things that everyone knows, or at least they think that they need it, right? But nobody wants to deal with it, right? And because it's such a mammoth beast, and I think it's still a problem for companies. I think because there's not enough focus around, like anything else, not enough focus around the strategy, right? Kind of, you need to have a strategy even for your CRM. Like, what does that look like? Like, what am I going to do with it? Why do I need it? What are my goals? What's sort of the desired outcomes, and how we're going to be using the CRM? And I think because there's just so many moving parts, and I know I'm sure we'll talk about tech stack here during this conversation, but there's just so many moving parts around technology, the data itself, and so many players, right? Everybody is in the CRM, that it's just an extremely complex a complex tool, but also just a complex process. It's sort of all encompassing, an ecosystem, I guess. I can't think of a great word for it, but it's just so complicated that you need to have really good strategic vision around it, frameworks, right? Process and governance, I think, around the CRM for it to not be a problem. And I'm sure John has more thoughts. We could probably talk about this, like I said, for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sure. John, what do you think about it? What's your perspective? Yeah.
Our approach here at Lilly is that customer data is king, and as we go through our sales engagement process with prospects, we're trying to capture as much of that data as humanly possible, and ultimately it does reside in CRM throughout the entire sales process, whether it's our SDRs on the very front end of the sales process, our AEs, our sales engineers, or hopefully eventually our customer success team. We've got no shortage of people engaging with and meeting with the clients and prospective customers. So we're trying to capture as much of that information so that we can better determine how to position ourselves from a go-to-market standpoint. It helps us figure out what it is that we're doing correctly and as well as incorrectly, and also helps from a timing standpoint as well. And then one other aspect in terms of the usage of the data that we're capturing in CRM is we try to repurpose that internally. I turn that over to our sales enablement team. They incorporate that and roll that into sales training, onboarding for new sales reps, and it becomes part of our DNA then moving forward in terms of lessons learned.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I think one of the things that we noticed, we've spoken to over 150 odd RevOps managers across different companies in different markets. So everybody talks about the massive tech stacks, or also to that extent bloated tech stacks, which creates a lot of tech debt. The siloed data across different teams, as as everybody moved to hybrid work in the last 2 years. So you got a distributed setup, and the whole buyer experience and the buying journey. It's basically scattered as well, right? I mean, it's not connected to the sales process. The buyer is at a different stage in the sale in the buying process, whereas seller is trying to sell them as per the CRM stage that they are at. So they don't meet at the same point in time. Salesforce adoption continues to be a big challenge. It's a number one problem for a lot of enablement teams to drive the CRM adoption. And then, like, let's face the fact, right? People don't like to enter data in CRM. I mean, you're talking about like a friction between human and machine here. The organization wants people to update CRM so they can get the insights and data that they need to make the business decisions. Whereas on the other hand, you got users, and these are humans who need to update CRM, and CRM is not helping them do their job better, right? It's not helping you to like sell better at the end of the day. So there's this constant friction, like from seller to the CRM. They don't get value out of it, and thus they'll not like use it or give data back. So it results into like the age-old problem of CRM data not being complete. So that's something which we noticed, and it's interesting to see like how you guys are solving it at Lily, Johnny, John, and I think Rosalind, you shared some perspectives as well. So we'd love to go a little bit deeper as well onto this topic by talking about the companies here, right? I mean, do you think organizations have resigned to this idea that the data leaks, for the reasons we discussed, will exist and cannot be plugged, and people are happy with the status quo? What do you think you're seeing as you talk to folks out there?
John, do you want to take this one
Yeah,
first?
yeah, no, it's just I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to speak over your Rosalind. No, I'll go ahead and I'll speak to this one first. In terms of capturing the data, our thought is this. I've been doing, like I said, I've been in sales operations for close to 20 years, and to your point, Abhijit, I think one of my biggest challenges is getting my users to input that data into Salesforce, and that requires a bit of time from the sales reps perspective. Time that they anticipate or envision being able to close business and what have you. And so I try to be as sensitive to that as humanly possible. So where Nektar really comes in is it takes a lot of the onus or the requirements off of the AE or the sales rep's plate. It does all of that data and activity capture for them, allowing them to kind of focus on making it rain and closing deals and closing business. And then beyond that, we look at Nektar in two ways: not just a data capture and activity capture tool, but also every bit as importantly, we look at it very much as a productivity tool for the sales rep, so they can really focus on what it is that their charter consists of primarily, which is closing business.
Interesting. No, great to know, John, how you guys have been using Nektar to solve this problem. Rosalind, what do you see other ways organizations do it in terms of like fixing the CRM data? What are the best practices you have seen as a practitioner?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there to unpack as well. Kind of going back maybe to the question around, do you think, companies have, sort of accepted the fact, right, that they're going to have these data leaks? I think it's kind of a yes and no, right? I think everyone sort of, it's become like a norm. Nobody expects their CRM to have great data. Everyone's like, oh, it's just a given, but everybody knows it needs to be better, right? And I think everyone's trying to get it to a state where it's much more useful. In terms of some of the things that I think people have done or I've done in my past life to try to help with that is around, again, even with your CRM, it's like having that understanding of what is it that you want from the CRM, right? And from any technology that you purchase, right? You want to understand what is the use case, what's the value, what is the business, kind of the challenges that you're looking to solve. And your CRM should be no different. Yes, it's a much bigger piece of technology. It's like your ERP, right? It's huge, but you're still going to have multiple use cases, right? Just many, many dozens probably of use cases that you want to solve for. But thinking about that and then going back to basics, right? This is something I always preach about, just fundamentals. Go back to basics around what is it that you want from the CRM and then start building that, that, right? And make sure that you have that available versus trying to kind of boil the ocean and put everything into the system. So along that, I think having that sort of understanding what you want to do with the technology, having a roadmap, right, around where you're going to go with it and how you're planning to use it, but having process, right? I mean, I can't over support, sort of overemphasize how important process is, right? Having processes and processes that you're continuing to iterate, we know they're going to change, but having process, having policies, and then driving that adoption, right? As John mentioned, it's training the team. I'm just always surprised by how often we either don't document our process or we do, but we don't communicate. We don't tell anybody about it, right? We don't tell folks about the process or enable them to follow the process and explain to them the why, right? We're all human. And the whole thing about is when somebody asks us for something, it's like, oh my gosh, it's changed. They're asking for something. And immediately our response is like, what's in it for me? What does this mean to me? How is this going to affect me? And so doing a lot of that selling around the communication of process, the enablement, and then driving the adoption. I think all of those are things that people, they're fundamental. When you say it, everyone's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's common sense. We should do that. But in just the rate of business and just, lack of bandwidth and time or resources or focus, people don't spend enough time in those areas.
Yeah, that's right. So we've started getting the poll results as well. So I think the first one that we had around how much time per quarter does your team ask sales reps to enter data? So 44% of the responders believe it's 1 to 15 hours, and 28% believe it's 16 to 30 hours. And you got interestingly, there are 12% who believe it's 0 hours. So I believe these are the folks who are Nektar customers. Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting to see there's still significant amount of time people believe is spent in CRM. I mean, 46% believe it's more than 16 hours. So that's like 3 hours, more than 3 hours a day. So that's very significant. The second question we had was how much data is missing in, and do you know if you're how much data you're missing in CRM? So 88% of the folks say they don't know how much data is missing in CRM. So I think that's very interesting. So one is like the data leakage, but a big chunk of folks do not today know that how much data they are missing in CRM. So what do you think, Rosalind? Is it because they don't think they're missing data, or it's about there's no way to find out if there's data that's missing? What's your
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's probably the latter, because even when I saw the poll question, it's like, what do we not know, right? What do we not have in our CRM? I think it's, knowing, maybe it goes back to sort of that thought around, hey, my CRM data is not great. It could be better. And we could have more of better data. So I don't know that probably if you talk to 10 people, 9 out of 10, or maybe all 10 are going to say it could be better, right? We could have more data or better data. And that's probably where folks lean to say, I don't even know what I'm missing. It's sort of that unknown piece of it.
Yeah. And John, what do you think, the extent of data you were missing in CRM? I remember we started working with you guys back in January 2022. What's your take on this discussion where how much data you were missing in your CRM? I know now it's completely perfect. Yeah.
Where shall I begin in terms of our missing data? Gosh, no, Nektar really provided a shot in the arm. When I came on board, we were very much in startup mode. We had a very small sales team at that point. I quadrupled the size of our sales team since I've been on board. And part of that has been putting in, as Rosalind alluded to, some process and some metrics in place to measure this. And so when it comes again to the data, we try to put in as many best practices in place. There's a regiment behind that, but really there's that human factor, and that's really where Nektar solves problems. It really picks up where the human effort leaves off, and it ensures that we're capturing everything, every meeting, every customer contact. It's all scraped, it's all captured, and we get it all in our CRM at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, great to see the progress we made together there, John. So it's time for the next poll. Before we move on to the further Q&A, I'd love to see everybody's views here. What's the state of Salesforce adoption in your company? So let's take a moment to respond to this before we move to the Q&A. When I was a VP of sales at my previous company before starting Nektar, I always had this as like the number one pain point. Following up with my team, I'll love to understand what people think here. So we have votes trickling in. So while we wait for the poll to complete, it would be interesting to go back to John here. So John, Lilly is a young company, and you mentioned I think when we started working with you, you just raised a Series A round and were setting up like a go-to-market engine, and that's when you joined and you took things to the next level. So what were the data problems that you anticipated? And I remember you guys like took a proactive approach to lock the bulls by the horn, right? I mean, you basically wanted to solve the problem before it becomes a problem. Love to understand your perspective. Yeah.
No, again, like I said, as I was building this new team, that the data entry piece and driving that behavior, especially with the new group of reps, was a particular challenge. We spent a lot of enablement hours going through the process, documenting what it is that they were responsible to capture in terms of data capture. And we made a very, very clear outline in terms of what their responsibilities were. And so with that, we probably got somewhere in the area of between 50 to 60% of what I would consider to be active participation in terms of, and what I mean by participation is participation and fulfilling all of your requirements and obligations in the CRM. And so that's always a challenge, getting users to adopt and to input. So really getting a lot of our initial contacts, and I know we're going to speak a little bit to that later. That's where Nektar was crucial for us, because we were looking at opportunities or account details with minimal contacts. And once we turned the Nektar solution on, that problem went away. It was something that we could look at in our rear view mirror as we continued down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Roslyn, where have you seen data problems emerge, especially in the early stage companies like Series A, Series B stage? What are the typical problems that you've seen start emerging at this stage for companies?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is, and they're almost like at the opposite sides of the spectrum, right? I think there's one side where you think you need data, so you just flood your CRM with every piece of data that you have, right? Whether it's good or not, whether it's clean or not, whether it's accurate or not. You buy lists, you dump them into your CRM. You attended, you host an event, you dump all of it into your CRM, and you think that you need all of that information, and that information sits there and it ends up being useless information that just clogs the CRM or causes confusion, and it never gets updated. And then you have the opposite side, where once you start hiring folks and you have people on board, they're moving so quickly, and things are changing so fast that you're not getting complete data, right? People are just filling in one contact, first name, last name, email, just to get through the mandatory, whatever the required fields are, and then they're moving on. And so they're not capturing a lot of the information that could be very beneficial down the road, or if the deal, doesn't close, for us to be able to, go back to have that information. So I think there's kind of both sides of either having too much information that's irrelevant, like bad data in your system, irrelevant data, or missing data, right? And I think at this stage, kind of the Series A, B, then you start to realize, like, okay, I really need to refine my ICP. I need to figure out who the right contacts are. I need to enrich my data because they need to scale, right? And at that point is oftentimes when they say, oh, we need ops help. Somebody come in and help me fix my data, right? And then at that point, it's more of a rebuild and build out than it is for just building the right way in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. So we got like our poll results in place here. So only 8% of the people believe 90% or more users use Salesforce effectively. And then 17% believe that over 60% of the users in their team use effectively. So what it means is 75% of the folks believe that a majority of their team is not using CRM effectively. So that's still a big problem. CRM is like, or 1998 is when Salesforce started. So you're looking at 24 years since Salesforce existed, and CRMs have been there for like more than 5 decades now. But still, the CRM adoption continues to be a big problem, as you're noticing in the polls here as well. So let's move on to our next question here. So John, what triggered the need for Lily to solve the CRM data leak problem that we're talking about? What in first place was bothering the go-to-market team, the leadership, with this lack of data in the CRM that triggered for you guys to look for a solution to solve for it?
Right. No, when I came on board, we were very much in startup mode, and one of the things that we were trying to do was begin to document, implement process, and create a sales motion, a repeatable sales motion by which our reps could, properly market, our solution, and part of that was, I think, just making sure that we knew what these requirements were and being able to double down on the information that we were retrieving from these prospective clients, and being able to leverage that in a way that moving forward we can look at, repurpose, and then re-review, just to make sure that we were reaching out to not just the right people, but also that we were reaching out to the right people at the right time.
Yeah, yeah. And Roslyn, I mean, you've been like a RevOps leader at multiple companies. Um, how important was for you to have like data hygiene in place, and how it impacted the business goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about how everything starts with, starts and ends with data, right? Because you have to have the right data in order to actually make the right decisions, figure out the right insights, figure out the next action. So incredibly important to have that information, but incredibly difficult to continue to maintain the accuracy, keep it running properly, and then optimize. I've seen a lot of companies, I think, try to clean up their data. They bring in somebody third party, come in and clean all of their data, one time cleanup. But I think the problem is that you can't approach your data as a one time action, right? It's not a one time event. It's an ongoing and iterative process, right? And that's why I think the CRM, kind of going back to the first question around why is why is the CRM hygiene so bad? It's because it's constantly evolving, and we're not evolving our processes and our the infrastructure to support it fast enough.
Yeah. So I think it's time for the next poll for us to understand the depth of CRM data and how clean it is. So I'll get the team to put up the poll again. So how are you ensuring your CRM data is clean and complete to the best extent? What do you typically do to manage it? Are you enabling reps to do better manual data entry by SOPs and processes and stick and carrot mechanism that's been there for ages, or you have like some sort of an automated activity capture solution that you're using, or you have like your sales engagement solutions doing that job for you in terms of capturing activities, or the different UI solution that you have on top of Salesforce, or something like Slack to update your CRM, or there's an email plugin. I mean, there are various ways organizations solve it. So love to understand how everybody does it today. Yeah. So as we start getting the poll results, we'll move on to our next question. Rosin, this one is for you. Let's move to tech stacks. So how should companies approach their tech stack implementation, selection, maintenance with respect to solving CRM data leaks?
Oh yeah. So number one, do not go for shiny object syndrome. Fight it however you can. Definitely think, going back to kind of earlier point, just around making sure that you have a strategy around your tech stack. Right? It sounds silly, but it really is, right? You really need to understand what your roadmap looks like. I always tell people that, for today, like, just go out and map out your tech stack across the buyer and customer journey, kind of the end-to-end funnel, and just see, what do you actually have and what are you using that technology for. And so before you go to purchase new technology, one, obviously understanding what you already have in place, but also make sure that when you do go to buy technology, that you are laser focused on what is the business case that I'm trying to solve for, what is the use case, what is it that I'm trying to do, and how am I going to get ROI, what's going to be my value from purchasing this technology. and then does it meet those needs, right? And so when you do go to buy tech, before you buy, obviously you're thinking about implementation, you're thinking about budget and cost and all those things. But when you think about how you're going to actually implement the technology and integrate it with your existing tech stack is really important. But also, what is that plan going to look like for configuration, rollout, how you're going to update your processes and your policies around that? And then again, enablement. I can't like stress enough, and I know John will be on this page with me too, is I can't stress enough how important it is, the communication and the enablement and training and ongoing enablement of any technology that you buy. Because I mean, how often we buy a tool, we're like, oh, we have a lead routing problem, we buy a tool for it. We don't configure it properly. We don't integrate it properly to the CRM and to some of the other tools. We don't enable our team properly. Guess what? It sits there. Nobody ever gets value from it. 3 months, 6 months down the road, shiny new object comes out. And they're like, oh, that tool's not working for me. I need to go buy, X isn't working for me anymore. I need to go buy Y. And then you very easily become this Frankenstack, right, of your tech stack where you just have all these different pieces. So I can't preach enough around having a strategy, having a roadmap, and just a really well-defined plan around how you're going to use that technology and build all of this infrastructure around it to support it to be successful, meaning processes, people, right? Training the people, enabling them, having the right processes, and then integration is really important. I mean, we have such great technology today, right? I mean, in your last poll, you listed a bunch of technology that I would have said all of the above, right? Everyone's using all of them, but leverage that integration and automation, because that's where you're going to help solve some of those data leaks. You're going to promote better rep productivity because they're not spending time doing any manual work. You're collecting the data through their just normal performance of their day and bringing that data into the CRM. So I'll get off my soapbox for now.
Yeah. No, I love the way
Can
that
I,
you
can I
did
amplify
Frankie
one?
back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
So,
was just going to say, I just wanted to amplify one thing that Rosalind said because it was such a tremendous point. I
yeah.
think a lot of us, when we roll out a process, for instance, or when we roll out a new tool, for instance, there's so much emphasis and attention that gets on the front end, where a lot of us, and I can certainly be guilty of this as well, but where a lot of us fall down, or maybe where we fail from a follow-up standpoint, is coming back several months later, whatever it is, 3 months, 6 months, re-reviewing that process or that tool, and then putting some blood, sweat, and tears in terms of the optimization of what you've got in place already. And that optimization piece is so key. And that's an ongoing part of the process that should probably come up at least annually, if not quarterly, from a tool or a process standpoint. And sorry, I did not mean to cut you off, Abhijit. I just wanted to add that.
I was just asking Rosalind, have you thought of considering trademarking Frankenstack?
What's funny is a couple of times I said that, and I thought it was a pretty common term. I've always called it a Frankenstack, and I was surprised that there were quite a few people who were like, "Oh, that's a really cool term." I'd never heard that. Maybe people who have experienced a Frankenstack enough, we have that kind of in our regular vocabulary. That's like saying CRM at this point.
Yeah, no, it is like, I mean, a lot of folks I've spoken with have resonated with that term. And that's the situation. I mean, there are like probably a couple of dozen tools out there in any tech stack out there of any Series B startup. And as you grow more in stages, more advanced companies in their growth journey would have like a much more complex tech stack, right? I mean, if it doesn't get solved in the early days, it gets too complex to manage. So yeah, Frankenstack is the word, and a Frankenstack will create Franken data of sorts. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So
That's right.
it just doesn't get easier, right? And I think RevOps team acts as like the unsung warrior here, dealing with this data mess and the Frankenstack we spoke about. So it's pretty important to get the strategy right, as you guys both pointed out. So getting the strategy, backing it up with the right follow-ups, and then automation is the key here as well. The right automation across the buyer journey and the sales process could solve a lot of problems around the poor data or the missing data. And then obviously, like if you solve for data, you can solve for insights and the right actions that can be taken using those insights. So moving on to the next question here. In fact, I think we got the poll results, so I love to like first go through the poll before we move on to the next question. So the question we had was, how are you ensuring your CRM data is clean and complete to the best extent? So 35% of the folks, so nearly one third, use the workflow solutions. So typically sales engagement solutions like Outreach and SalesLoft, largely used by SDRs and BDRs, who basically uh, updating the activities. I think the experience that we've had, and I think Roslyn and John, you guys can like pitch in as well there, is that it's used by a selected set of users, and then obviously like the activities that you do within those systems that get captured. 28% still use manual data entry. So again, I think it's a big opportunity for folks to start automating the process. And then one third of the folks are using automation solutions like Einstein, Nektar, and some of the other solutions available in the market. So I mean, there are folks who are going towards automation, but still, I think a lot of folks continue to use the other ways of capturing data. Yeah. What's your take on this, Roslyn? What's your reaction to the poll? Yeah.
I guess I'm a little surprised by the enable reps on manual data entry. That scares me. It gave me a little bit of a cringe. Like, I don't know if you saw, I kind of shuddered a little bit because I mean, I'm just think about these are, some of your most talented people, right? Individuals in your organization that you're paying them to go do a specific job, right? Because to go acquire revenue or retain revenue or expand. And that's what they're good at. And you're having them waste time putting in, manual data entry. I think there's going to be pieces of it that are going to be, you have to do it. There's no way to avoid it. It's inevitable because that's the only way to get the information from them. They're the only person that can kind of provide that information. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of, going back to just the technology aspect of it, there's so many ways to capture information at every point in the sales cycle, but also across, we always talk about buyer journey and customer journey, but at every touch point from a sales perspective, where the actual manual input from a rep should be very minimal, at least into the CRM, right? It's, you might be working in an Outreach, or a SalesLoft or a Groove or, some other sales engagement tool, and then you're capturing that data. So yeah, there's some of that going on, but at the same time, there's technology out there where they can just work as they normally work and capture that data in their CRM.
Yeah, and so there's this seller data, right, which is scattered across lead to cash. So you look at SDRs and BDRs, they have their own workflow. They deal with the same account and opportunity. You got the account executives who take over the opportunity process and opportunity management. They have their own set of data that they are generating as they multi-thread into the deal. And then you got like the implementation team or solution engineers who come into the sales process as well, especially for high ticket value deals. They get involved, and there's an important data point that they generate. And those guys are not like using any kind of a sales engagement solution. It's something which is not their use case. And then you got the onboarding team and the customer success team, which uses a customer success software. So they're also dealing with like probably 10 more contacts than what the sales team dealt with. And there are those activities which are again scattered. And if you go top of the funnel, you got like the website which is visited by the buyers. The same buyer would do their own research and would be visiting your website to read more about you. And there are like different other channels. If you look at whole top to bottom, lead to cash, or the bow tie, as I think we call it, and especially in B2B SaaS sales process. So it's quite important to like also look at it holistically and define and unify this data set at an account and opportunity level. Because once this is like sorted in your CRM, you can use that to drive different critical business insights, whether it's about rep productivity, how busy is everyone, to like looking at your account planning and ABM, as well as like your forecasting and opportunity management. So yeah, but I'm surprised as well to see like a lot of folks still use manual data entry to go about it. John, what's your reaction to the poll?
I'm a little bit surprised as well, but I kind of get it. It just depends on where certain organizations are at in terms of their life cycle. But our approach is this: we're trying to again, we're very much a startup. I'm trying to build a foundation in place so that we can go from 20 AEs or sales reps to 200 overnight. And with that in place, from a scalability standpoint, we're trying to leverage automation in terms of tools such as Nektar, for instance, whenever possible, because we want to take that manual aspect off of the plate. It's not the best use of our rainmakers' time, but also, again, we want to stress automation and leverage that automation wherever possible. That's how you build a scalable organization or sales team.
Yeah, with you on that 100%, John. So let's move on to the next question. So when it comes to revenue stack, should we solve for buyer experience or should we solve for seller experience? I mean, there are like different viewpoints that emerge. Rosalind, will go with you first. What's your take on buyer experience versus seller experience?
Yeah, I've seen some grumblings about this recently, just on social and people talking about it. Honestly, I think you have to do both. I think it's the technology. If we think about tech stack that's available, um, there's different use cases for each part of the funnel, right? And so there's different technology that you're going to use to engage with your prospect or buyer in the way that they want to be engaged, right? And how they want to be met. But with that, the seller experience is sort of on the other side of that. I guess I think you have to do both. And I don't think that they're necessarily an either or. Because I think about the buyer experience as sort of the external, how easy is it for the buyer, for example, to do business with you? How easy is it for them to understand your business, what you do and what the value you bring, and then to interact with you and then to continue to interact with you, right? And get value from your product. But on the sales side, you're giving them technology to just enable them to go do that, right, with the buyer. So I think it's I don't know, I may be simplifying or missing the argument here, but I think it's both. I mean, you have to do both.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think it's a gentle blend of both. However, I do want to point out one thing, given the state of the economy that we're in, or lack thereof in terms of the economy, this is very much evolving into a buyer's market. So we, as sellers, really need to elevate or elevate our game a little bit in terms of, because it ultimately is going to boil down to the customer experience. Whichever vendor or solution provider can provide an end-to-end onboarding, a clean, crisp, pure customer experience to the end customer, those are going to be the ones that end up floating to the top, kind of like a cream. I think just with the state of where we're at as a nation in terms of, again, the economy, I think that there's going to be a lot more attention. It is very much a buyer's market, I think, at this point. And so, but to Rosalind's point, it's good to keep your eye on both sides of that equation, or the entire ball, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. No, customer experience is paramount. We know Amazon always talks about this. They keep an empty chair. If you look at any of the discussions that happen in Amazon's office, there'll be like an empty chair always there around the table. So what Bezos always calls it, that's the seat of the customer. So that's how important they take customer experience. And even you look at Apple, right? I mean, it's a company we admire. And if you buy an iPhone, it's largely because of the experience that they deliver, right? As you start using the product and the experience and after sales and the whole ecosystem that's there for the user. So I think it's important to focus on the customer experience. Seller experience is important too, but I think as you get started, and especially in today's economy, as John pointed out, charting out the buyer journey, charting out like the customer experience, how you'd want that to be solved for. I think that could be taken as like a strategic outlook from the beginning, and then marry the sales process to it, because most businesses, more often than not, just look at building their CRM stages, that how is our sales process from, let's say, the discovery call to demo to proposal to like negotiation and close. And that's like a stage checklist that gets embedded into CRM, and that's getting pushed without any context or consideration given to like how buyer is like coming prepared, how buyer wants to be sold to. Especially in the last 2 years, buyers have completely moved on to a different stage. I mean, they are buying digitally, even in B2B, doing a lot of research, coming prepared even before they do the first discovery call. And imagine a conversation when an SDR goes into the discovery meeting asking some basic questions, then when buyer is just looking for like a pretty well articulated demo on a specific feature that they need, right? So there's a big gap to be filled there, and important to bring in all of that together in terms of the buyer experience, the buyer data that gets generated, and embedding that into like the sales process and into the CRM as you pursue your accounts and opportunities. So with that, I'll love to move to our next poll in terms of the challenges that we are facing with CRM or sales data. So I'd love for the team to put up the poll for our audience. Yeah. Yeah. So, what challenges are you facing with your CRM or sales data? Is it resulting into poor forecasting and performance reporting, or the lack of data or incorrect data is creating lack of repeatable sales processes, or it's creating issues around sales and marketing alignment, or the coaching aspect of it, right? Guiding your coach to hitting quota faster. So, what do you think is the number one problem that gets linked because of the poor sales data? So, let's respond to this while we wait for everybody to submit their polls and responses. We move on to the next question here around productivity. I noticed the last point in our poll was around rep productivity. So, Rosin, would love your take on how can lack of CRM data impact rep productivity?
Oh wow. Yeah, lots of ways. One, I mean, just the manual entry that we touched on earlier, I think that's a huge impact on rep productivity because not only the time that it takes for them to manually input the data, but think about just the employee sort of satisfaction and motivational factor, right? If they're going to spend, what was it, 16 hours, some people were saying, over 15 hours of manual input, that would definitely make me not want to be doing that, right? When you could be using that time to do other things. So definitely some wasted time there from a productivity perspective, not to mention the accuracy perspective, right? Whenever you have manual input from a human, there's always the risk of having, inaccurate data. But also, I think, not having the right data in the CRM or even in any system for a rep to use ends up affecting their productivity by the fact that they have to waste time looking for data, right, to go look for answers to what they need to gather all of this data to be able to go now have a productive conversation with their prospect, right, or with the customer. Or worst case, you have the wrong data, right, in the CRM, leading them to now take the wrong action, or imagine calling the wrong contact, for the wrong company, or the wrong them having the wrong position, or just not even having the right phone number to get to that person. Worst case, like getting on the phone with somebody and then having the wrong pitch, right, because you had the wrong data in your system. So wrong actions, misguided steps, a lot of the kind of things that could go wrong if you have the incorrect data in the system as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And John, what's your experience with Fuller CRM data? I think you pointed out that you're pretty happy with the CRM data that you have in your system. What's your experience with it? What is that you're able to do now that you're not able to do back in Jan?
Forecast correctly, but that, and I say that tongue in cheek, but it is actually true because Nektar gave us a lot more data and a lot more insight, especially in regards to the customer journey, right? But where I see the biggest impact is our reps love Nektar because it takes so much off of their plate. It really allows them to focus on what it is they're supposed to do, drive revenue and make it rain ultimately.
Yeah. So we got the poll results coming in, and this is like one-sided. So the number one challenge everybody is facing with regards to lack of CRM data or bad data is forecasting and performance reporting. 80% of the people have voted for it. So I think it's the number one pain that people face when you have poor data in CRM. I think no surprise there, but yeah, it also affects the other points that are there in the poll. But looks like everybody feels the most pressure around forecasting, especially in today's climate. I think forecasting and performance management at a company level becomes very important. Rosin, moving on to the next aspect around data and the role CRM data plays in cross-functional alignment, especially sales, marketing, or marketing and customer success, or sales and customer success. Would love to hear your perspective around the role CRM data plays.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all think that the CRM is sort of the single source of truth, right? And I think most of us would say, probably isn't really the single source. Right? I think companies want it to be, but what happens, right, when you force that to be your single source of truth is that you waste a lot of time. I think trying to force all of your other systems and your technology or even your processes to adhere to and actually be limited by, right, the restrictions of your CRM, right, and the requirements of the CRM. Or you always lead to this sort of CRM first mentality when you have a problem. You're like, oh, well, what can we do in Salesforce? Oh no, Salesforce doesn't allow for that, right? And that's sort of that knee jerk reaction versus using the CRM as, yes, a vehicle to help with all of these, a place for all of the different cross-functional teams to go seek certain points of view and certain pieces of data. I've kind of moved away from the single source of truth and have been talking about the single view of the business, right? And trying to get folks to kind of align to that. It's more important to have a single view of the business and have that alignment cross-functionally, and not just across the go-to-market team, but also across finance, right? And your product team and your C-level, your executive team, and your legal team, HR. Everybody needs to have that single view of the business versus worrying about a single source of truth. Always implies sort of a system, right? You have a system where everything is housed. So I think having that single view of the business, whether that is in a different system or in your CRM, is most important. So I guess wherever that lies plays a huge role in driving alignment, right? Because again, you have that single view of the business and everyone marching to the same, looking at the data the same way and marching sort of to the same objectives and the same beat.
Yeah. John, I love your perspective around account-based marketing. I remember some of the conversations I had with your team. You guys are big on ABM. So where do you see CRM data being utilized for an effective ABM strategy?
Oh gosh, now that the data that we're capturing in CRM, or in our case Salesforce, is instrumental to our ABM our ABM approach, because we're trying to identify not just the right people to engage, but also from a timing perspective. And this is where all of that data collection throughout the sales process or the engagement process really comes into play. It's not just a matter of connecting to the right person, but it's also the timing of that and getting in front of the decision maker at the appropriate time in the sales process. So leveraging ABM resources from a contact standpoint has really allowed us to kind of laser focus in on not just who, but when, and when they need to be engaged.
Gotcha. Yeah. So John, it'll be interesting to go through some of the work that we did together, and what do you think of the implementation we did at Nektar? I think there's some of the results that we had. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think we focused on automating your CRM data. I think there are a bunch of activities that were missing in CRM that we could bring in back, and also the contacts that we added, 4x more contacts, things around pipeline visibility, actionable leading indicators, and I think rep productivity. So what's the single most important thing you found out of all the things that we did together?
Abhijit, you're putting me on the spot, but because all of these, everything that we're calling out on this slide had a tremendous impact on our business. So if you're going to force me to pick one of these, then they're all pertinent and extraordinarily important. But the one I'm going to go with is the one at the very bottom, which is rep productivity. Once again, anything that I can do to make their lives better, to minimize the amount of manual data entry, it makes me look like a hero to them. So I will say that if I had to go with one, it's certainly the rep productivity, because Nektar does everything for them. They love Nektar because they don't have to deal with Nektar. It works in the background, and it just seamlessly captures all the contacts, including contacts that they might not even be aware of, or they don't have knowledge of. And so there's a lot of again, no shortage of benefits, but if I had to pick one, I'll go with rep productivity.
Yeah. We love the fact that we're able to realize the vision we had for Nectar with you, John, and especially with Lily. Our vision was always to be like this AI assistant for sales teams. So yeah, looks like reps love Nectar because they don't have to deal with Nectar, and that's the best part of it because it's that invisible AI assistant they've got, which does their job for them. So love to see that you guys appreciate the value there at Lily, and we appreciate you as a customer, of course. So it's been great working with you. I'm moving to the last question with that, and Rosalind, this one is for you. Broadly, with respect to the RevOps function, the RevOps team out there, what can they do to solve for CRM data hygiene?
Mm, okay. That's a big one. So I think kind of going back to just understanding what is your kind of the mission, what are your objectives for your CRM data, right? When you think about the data, think about, I always talk about, start with your go-to-market strategy and then think about your objectives and metrics and, or your objectives and goals. And then what are the metrics that matter to be able to measure performance against those goals, right? How we're tracking or how well we're doing. And then think about the key data, right? What is the data that I need to be able to measure those metrics effectively? So what data is critical to the business? What are sort of the must-haves versus the nice-haves or nice-to-haves? And then when you think about the must-haves, how kind of the how, when, and who, by whom, and by what, right? Kind of system and people and systems do we collect this data, right? And that's, I think, when you start to kind of think about cleaning up the data, because it's such a big project or process, get back to basics. Think about what's most important that you need to have. Where is the biggest gaps, and then how do you go fill those gaps, either temporarily to do one cleanup and kind of stop the leakage, if you will, and then continue to improve the information. And then when you think about that, think about how much has to be human intervention or intervention or human touch versus how much you can pull through systems and technology, right? Through automation and integration. Because anything that doesn't require a human touch and you can pull from somewhere else, the better your data quality is going to be, the better your productivity is going to be, as we've been talking about, and just the better adoption that you're going to get. And eventually you're going to start to get much better hygiene.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what is RevOps Collective doing here. Love to share with our audience as well. If you like to add anything there, what you are helping
Yeah.
organizations with. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I started the RevOps Collective really to help bring RevOps as a strategy, because to me, revenue operations is much more than a service. I know we talk about RevOps as a service a lot, and there's a lot there for sure. It's a mammoth of a beast to even do that. But if you think about even higher level RevOps as a strategy, as that strategic differentiator, right, to really bring RevOps to more organizations and really help optimize and improve their revenue process and drive that revenue engine that I always talk about. So yeah, definitely on a mission to bring that to more organizations and more people.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the fact that you focused on strategy there. I think you and I spoke about it, like how it's important to have a RevOps team get the seat at the strategy table. Um, I mean, I strongly believe that we are in that time where we are going to very soon see like the chief RevOps officer in organizations soon. I think the VP RevOps role is now getting more and more popular. There is a vice president of RevOps in a lot of companies, and which is very important. And ideally, and there's also this debate around whether the VP RevOps should report into the CRO or the CFO or the CEO. So I'm sure that's a topic for like another webinar. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time how RevOps can come in and play a critical role in terms of getting the seat at a strategy table, contributing towards the business growth, and not just being like helping with tactical firefighting. So we at Nectar are also like working with a lot of folks in order to promote this mission. So we're coming up with a petition. We're going to launch it soon with respect to the whole fight for getting seat at the strategy table. So we'll be sharing with everyone soon when that comes out. I just thought I'll share with everyone. John, thanks for your time today in sharing all the insights about your business and how you've seen the value coming out of Nectar and our relationship and engagement. We love having you as a customer, and thanks for trusting us early during our early days. And thanks, Rosaline. You've been always generous with your time with the RevOps community and sharing your wisdom and insights. So we loved having both of you today for our very first webinar. And thanks to our audience as well who participated in the conversation. I hope this was useful to you and you got value out of your time. Please do share your feedback. We'll be happy to improve, learn more. This was our very first initiative, so we are going to be doing more such sessions around revenue operations and key things that RevOps focuses on with respect to business value creation. So until then, we look forward to everybody's support, and thanks again for your time today. And have a good day. I know like there are interesting things that are going to unfold, especially as we had elections. Good luck with that. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you everyone for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.